When you hear improper fractions, what improper fractions really means is just a fraction that's more than one whole. So what that means, for example, is when I look at this fraction of 4/3, my numerator, my top number, is bigger than my denominator. So if I were to think about what my denominator means, it means that it's telling me how many pieces my whole is broken into. So here my denominator is 3. So it's saying that my whole is broken into 3 equal pieces. My numerator tells me how many of those pieces I have. So here I have 4 pieces. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that are each 1/3. It's called improper because it's more than 1. So it just looks funny. So when it says to change it to a mixed number is when we write it as a whole number with a fraction next to it. So if I want to change 4/3 to a mixed number, I'm trying to say how many wholes are there, and then what is the fraction? So if I look at this visual I just colored in, I can see that I colored in one whole fraction bar. That's because I was able to color in 3 out of 3 pieces. 3 out of 3 is equal to 1 whole. I needed to get to 4/3 though, so I still had 1/3 left to go, which you can see on the second fraction bar. So now if I look at the 3/3 and the 1/3, that 3/3 is equal to 1 whole and 1/3. So that becomes my mixed number. This will work with every single fraction. You can use a visual, but you can always think to yourself, well, if my denominator on this next one is 6, then I know to make 1 whole, I would have it broken into 6 pieces. Then I would have to color in all 6 of those pieces. So 1 whole would be 6 out of 6. But this is saying that I have 8/6. So if I'm only at 6/6 and I have to get to 8/6, I have to think how many more do I have to add? And that would be 2/6. So then this 6/6 is equal to 1, and then I still have 2/6 left over. So 8/6 is equal to 1 and 2/6. So with 9/4, my denominator is 4. So I'm thinking that 1 whole is saying 1 whole would be broken into 4 equal pieces. So if I were to color that in, that means that 1 whole would be 4 out of 4 pieces. Now I have to get to 9 pieces. So I'm only at 4. I can take another whole out of that. So 4 plus 4 is 8. And then I need 1 more to get to 9. So this time I have 1 whole, then another whole. So I have 2 wholes and 1/4. So sometimes they will equal more than just 1 whole. So again, let's look at 13/5. Again, my denominator is 5, so I know 5/5 would be 1 whole here. So I'm thinking 5/5. Well, 5, I have a while to get to 13, so let's try taking out another whole. Another 5/5. Well, 5 plus 5 would give me 10/5. So I have to count up 11, 12, 13, so I need 3 more fifths. So that's 1, that's 1, so I would have 2 and 3/5. So now pause the video and try these on your own. These are on your worksheet, then press play to check your answers. So for 6/5, again, your denominator was 5, so 5/5 was a whole. Then to get to 6, you needed one more. So your answer would be 1 1/5. For 5/3, my denominator is 3, so 3/3 would be a whole. So 3/3, I need to get to 5, so I would need 2 more thirds. So it would be 1 2/3. For 10/4, my denominator is 4, so my whole is broken into 4 pieces. So 4/4 would be a whole. I still have to get to 10, so I could add another 4/4. That gets me to 8. Then 2 more would get me to 10. So I have 1, 2, and 2/4. For 7/2, I'm thinking 2/2 would give me a whole. Well, that's only 2. That's 4. I can even do another one because 2, 4, 6, and then 1 more would get me to 7. So 1, 2, 3 wholes this time, and then 1/2. So now you're going to pause and try doing these on your own. When you're done, you can press play to work on to the next part. Now we're going to talk about how you change those mixed numbers, which is a whole number and a fraction, to an improper fraction, which again is just a fraction more than 1. So if I think about this 1 1/2, if I was coloring this in on a fraction bar, it would be 1 whole and then 1/2 of a fraction. So to make this into a fraction, I would have to ask myself, well, how could I make that 1 whole into a fraction? So I want to look at the denominator that I have on my fraction. My denominator here is halves, so I want to change my 1 whole into halves. So how many halves do I have? I have 1, 2, 3 halves. The way to think about that without the visual is to say, well, I know I have my 1/2 plus, how can I write 1 whole as halves? Well, I know my denominator is 2, so to make it into a whole, I would have to have 2 out of 2 because that would fill the entire fraction bar. And then 1 plus that 2 would give me the 3. So when you think again about 1 1/3, you're thinking I have a whole colored in, and then I have 1/3 of a fraction bar. So you have that 1/3, and then you're saying, okay, well that 1 whole I need now to cut into thirds. So if I'm thinking about that whole and cutting it into thirds, well, I can see it's going to take 1, 2, 3 pieces to fill it. So 3/3. So if I look and I add those together, you can see that 1 and the 3 would get me to 4/3. And if you check your visual, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4/3 are colored in. So let's try this one without a visual, because again, it's thirds. So I start with that 2/3, and then I look at that 1 whole. I'm working with thirds, so I'm going to use that denominator of 3. And I know to fill a whole, it has to be 3/3, because I would need to color in all my pieces. I add my fractions. 2/3 plus 3/3 would give me 5/3. So I write 3/4 here. Now I think about my denominator as 4. So if it's broken into 4 pieces, I need all 4, and I would get 7/4. When you have a number bigger than 1, it doesn't change a lot. I would still write my 3/5, but now, since I know I'm working with fifths, I know for 1 whole it would be 5/5, but since I have 2 of them, I have to write that 2 times. Then I add my numerators. 3 plus 5 is 8, plus another 5 would give me those 13/5. So it's the same exact thing. I'm still starting with that fraction. I'm looking at my denominator to see that it's a 6. I'm putting that 6/6, but then I have to say, oh, I have 2 wholes, so I need to do that 6/6 2 times because each of those represent 1 whole, and then I'm adding those together to get my 17/6. Again, there's no difference when I have 3 wholes. It just means that I have to write those wholes 1, 2, 3 times. So pause the video and try to do some of these on your own. When you're done, press play to check your answers. So remember, 1 whole here, I'd use my denominator, 4/4. And then I add the fractions together. My denominator is 6. I have 1 whole, so I'd write 6/6. And I'd get 8/6. I write down my fraction. I have to add on that 1 whole, which is 5/5. So I would get 6/5. Start with my fraction of 3/10. My denominator is 10, so I know 1 whole is 10/10, but this time I have 2 wholes, so I have to write it again. And then I add them together to get 23/10. Again, I have 2 wholes. My denominator is 8, so I write 8/8 to get my 19/8. My denominator is 4, so I'm working with fourths, so 4/4. And I have 2 wholes, so my answer should be 11/4. So now you're going to stop the video and then try and do some on your own.